Now I can look back and everything happened for a reason. But at the time, it was that immediate ambassador community who really pulled me through that difficult moment in our lives.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Burnt Chef Journal, a hospitality-specific podcast dedicated to challenging mental health stigma and conversations designed to inspire a new, healthier, happier, and more sustainable hospitality profession. Okay, and welcome to a special edition of the Burnt Chef Journal. I am joined here this week by Louise De Beer from... Whereabouts in South Africa are you, Louise?
I'm in Durban.
Durban.
Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you for joining. Matt Loughrey.
Well pronounced. From Birmingham, not quite as exotic.
From Birmingham. You do have like an orange glow. There's a white wall behind you, a salmon pink T-shirt, really painting the picture. And I've also got Tony Lewis up north in Manchester.
Indeed. Yeah. Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you guys for being here this morning. This is a special edition of the Burnt Chef's Journal as we present an episode about Stronger Together, a Mental Health Awareness Week special. And as part of Mental Health Awareness Week, we're launching a special edition of this episode to highlight and spotlight the voices of our ambassador community across the globe, exploring how community, connection, and shared experience shape our well-being in the hospitality industry. We're calling this episode Stronger Together because no one should feel alone in this industry, and your story will help inspire others, break stigma, and remind people of the power of being seen, heard, and supported. So, I've just taken my hat off and put it back on again because I realized that this was recorded. For context, for those who are listening, I've woken up with a head full of cold. And you know, one of those days where you get up and you go, I just don't have the energy to do my hair and to try and make myself presentable. That's one of those days today. And this is why the spirit and the power of community, these guys are going to help me through. So, Louise, for the listeners, it's the first time they've heard from you. Just give us a little bit of an insight into how you came into the world of hospitality.
Well, when I was at school, I was really bad at maths. And when we got to high school, our choice was maths or domestic science. So I went with domestic science and found out that I really enjoyed cooking. And so when I was getting to that point of school where I had to decide what I was going to do, I decided to go to a cordon bleu cooking school here in Durban. Sorry, no, in South Africa. I was in Cape Town. And so I was there for 3 years, from 1987 to 1989. So that gives away my age a little bit. And then we got to do in-service in various different establishments, restaurants, guest houses, B&Bs, hotels and that. And I fell in love with working in big hotels and big kitchens and just kind of stuck. It was at that time a very male-dominated industry, especially in big hotels. So you had a little bit of, as a woman, to adapt or die. I was also 18, so I was pretty young. But at the same time, I found them incredibly supportive of me. I mean, one of the things that I always think about was I walked into the kitchen one day and I was like, right, I'm on diet. I need to lose weight. And the whole kitchen team took me over to the butchery section, made me stand on the scale, measured my weight, and every week they'd go. And when I lost 10 kilos, one of the guys came and threw a pocket of potatoes at me and was like, that's how much you've lost, you know? And after I lost a fair amount, like every single one of them came to me and said, right, you've lost enough now. You need to stop. So it was very supportive, although, like I say, very male dominated.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I mean, that sounds like a supportive structure, despite, because we do hear stories of it going completely the other way, where it's actually used as ridicule and things like that. But that sounds like it's quite a nice story, right? Yeah,
I really appreciate it. And I'm still really good friends with a couple of them. And I see them 30 odd years later. It's great.
Good. Thank you, Louise. And Matt, what about yourself, sir? How did you get into the world of hospitality?
Well, first and foremost, I was very lucky growing up. I got to travel the world and see what really good service looks like. And so I kind of really fell into the industry age 16. And I'm one of those classic cases. Once I fell into it, I never left. And just worked my way up, really. So working for hotel brands like Marriott, Hilton, independent brands along the way. Through COVID, I also did a short stint working at sea for P&O Cruises. And now I find myself working directly for the Burnt Chef project, which is absolutely fantastic. So a snapshot of my journey. And I guess for my own part, I've always tried to be a leader that's built community. And it's great to hear Louise talk around inclusion as a female going into a male-dominated environment. But also looking at, within my own teams, equity, equality, inclusion, diversity, and really creating an environment where everybody can flourish as individuals is something that's really important to me. So that's kind of my journey, I guess. And obviously being part of the project now is also the community that we have as ambassadors, which no doubt we'll come on to in due course as well, which has been incredibly important to me personally.
What would you say is one of your key standouts, your key pros that's kept you in hospitality for this period of time?
I think the relationships that I've made, I mean, I know everybody says, oh, you can make great mates in hospitality, but the reality is that when I left school at quite a young age and went straight into the industry, the majority of my adult friends now have come from the industry. And I guess they therefore understand the pros and cons that the industry can throw out. They understand the weekend work, the late nights, the early mornings, and throw into that family life and life outside of work. But I think that, again, that community of friendship, community of contacts that have been there and lived a similar experience is something that now I find myself where I am. I feel incredibly lucky that I've got friends like that who understand the highs and the lows, not only of our industry, but also appreciation for the time that we get together, given the challenges that we've been through. So,
thank you. And last but not least, Tony Lewis, the world of hospitality legend in his own right, as with all of our guests. How did you first come into the world of hospitality, sir?
I think there's probably a few parallels there with the stories that you've just heard. But for me, at school, I remember doing the sort of culinary lessons and loving it, but not really knowing where to kind of put that or understand what the kind of next steps were. And then my mum was a chef first and foremost when I was a kid growing up. She had a daytime job and an evening job, and she would balance one or the other or both around us as kids. So there was always an influence of food and being a foodie at home, and particularly my dad as well. My dad was a huge foodie, and then went into culinary school straight out of high school and hated it. Had a horrendous cook school teacher who was ex-military that thought that he could just stand in the corner and scream and shout at people. And so the experience for me at culinary school wasn't particularly great. But then going into a restaurant and working in a restaurant, just fell in love with, as Matt and Louise have said, of relationships and bonds and diversity and different cultures or different backgrounds or different nationalities, and just learning about relationships as well as how to cook a steak or how to plate a good meal. And then progressed, pushed myself, challenged, and wanted to learn more, and went into working for large branded operators and progressed through the ranks from commie CDP all the way up to head chef, and then was offered roles bigger than that and opened 20 plus restaurants for branded Italian restaurants all over the UK, from Exeter to Glasgow, and then settled in Manchester. And I think gone through all of the different sort of journeys and stuff that everybody has already said and seen, of questioning what you're doing and is it the right thing to do as you go through COVID, and wondering what there'll be on the other side of it as an industry, and then being made redundant in more sort of later years of moving into recruitment and just being in places where you don't feel as right culturally, but you're committed and passionate to an industry, so you don't want to kind of leave it behind. And then more recently I've moved into running my own business and recruitment and consultancy for myself, and kind of being a one-man band, if you like, from local coffee shops and independent venues, and using sort of places as hopscotch places for an office for the day. So yeah, that's me in a kind of broad nutshell, I suppose.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that. Congratulations as well on the step into self-employment. It's a scary and daunting world, but it's also, it's probably one of the hardest jobs you'll ever do, but also one of the most rewarding, other than having children. Yes. And I also do believe that we have been joined by Louise Jackson, who's just logging in as well. So once she gets sorted and she comes online, we'll have a quick introduction from Louise as well. So as it is Mental Health Awareness Week, and it's a special episode that we're running today, I'm curious to know from each of you when the first time you came across the Burnt Chef project was, and why you decided to get involved in your own ways with the project. So, Louise, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, so my late husband was also a chef for many years. He hung his apron strings up and moved into a different industry. But he was an alcoholic and suffered from drug-resistant depression, which I didn't understand. I didn't understand depression at all. And he worked away from home a lot, and then he got retrenched in 2017, I think it was. And he came home. So all of a sudden I had him home 24/7, whereas he used to work away for 8 weeks, come home for 10 days and that. So I got to see his alcohol dependence for real. And because he was depressed and that, it just kind of spiraled. And it got to a point where I came home one day. He'd been home, I think, for about 3 months. The washing up hadn't been done. The house, nothing had been done in the house. And I just completely had a meltdown. My children still joke and they say, well, you better do the washing up, otherwise mum's going to go throw you in the loony bin. But I literally packed my husband's bag and took him down to the local hospital, and I was like, I don't know what to do with him. So then I got speaking to his psychiatrist and all of that, and I found out a little bit more about depression and addiction and that. He went to rehab and he was sober for 2 years, and then he passed away from something else. And then we went into lockdown, and I started doing a life coaching course because I started thinking, I really need to get involved with this kind of thing. And from doing the life coaching course, I thought I really need to get involved with students, the younger generation. I had worked at a cooking school for quite a while, so you'd seen the kids come in going, oh, I love to cook and prepare stuff and make stuff and that. And 3 months later, when they'd been working hours and weekends and not having a family life, not seeing their friends, they'd all sort of start melting. So I really wanted to do something to give them the tools to deal with all of that kind of stuff. And then just Googling, looking online, chatting to people, I came across the Burnt Chef project, and I was like, this is it. This is what I need to get involved in. It did take me a little while, which we'll talk about other things later, but it took me a bit of a while to get into it. But yeah, I'm loving it.
And it's a pleasure having you on board as well. You've done college talks and made a huge impact already. So thank you for that. And Tony, what about yourself?
I think I remember meeting and seeing online, there was a very old black and white photography showcase from the early days. And we must be going back 5 years ago now, and seeing something starting. And then there was an offer, I think, of being able to study mental health awareness on a very sort of junior level, if you like, an infancy level, and thought that is something that I think I will learn from, but not only I will learn from about myself, but also be able to kind of support and coach the teams around me. I think at the time I was exec chef of, I think, 5 or 6 different restaurants for a small group across the Northwest, and thought there's sort of 5 or 6 head chefs and the sort of 10 sous chefs or whatever it is across the group that are certainly going to need support. And the more I studied it and got into it, the more I kind of learned about myself and realized how I had gone through challenges before and not been able to articulate, or gone very introvert, which is really not me, if many people will know, and just really understood a lot about me and how I could kind of put and articulate and control the confusion or the kind of the infinite silence. I think I went into this place where I just couldn't speak about it, didn't know how to find the words to just put, this is a really fucking shit day, or this is a really challenging period of time, or not being able to process a decision that normally you'd be able to make in a very quick way. And actually finding the Burnt Chef project in the very, very early days was something that has actually really changed a lot about me, or says a lot about me, or I've been able to kind of put forward to other people. And it's been a game changer. And I think there's so much more to do. I think we're still, as a team, I think there's so much more we can do. And I even had a thought, and I haven't put it to anyone yet, and I'll probably share it to Lou, who's just joined, but I've got a great idea about something that we maybe should be thinking about for next year. And I'll certainly send it to you, Kris, as well, but probably for another day.
I love the ideas. Again, I think like keeping it very much on trend, but one thing that I've always said for such a long period of time is that it is the ambassador community that create the forward momentum to be able to keep this conversation going, make sure that we're current, make sure that we are doing everything that we can do in order to be able to drive impact and sustainable impact as well. And I still remember, Tony, the conversations we were having when this whole project first started and, spitballing ideas, and you've remained patient and calm with me whilst I try and work my socks off to get those ideas in place, some of them taking many years, but we're starting to see that come to fruition now. And these are all ideas from conversations that our ambassadors and community have given us. I'm not an oracle. This is a community interest project, and this is exactly what it does. Louise, welcome to the podcast. You join us a little bit later since we've launched. So to bring viewers or listeners into learning a little bit more about you, can you give us a very quick introduction and also let us know when you first came across the Burnt Chef project and why you wish to get involved?
So I'm Louise. I currently run a hotel and pub in North Yorkshire, and I found the Burnt Chef project after I had a gun pulled on me at work in one of my venues in London. I'd phoned my area manager and begged for the day off the next day so that I could recuperate and get my head around what happened. And they said, no, your business has to open. We've got nobody else to do it. You have to go into work. Deal with it. It's part of your job. It happens. And I spent my 2-hour journey home crying to one of the people on the other end of the text number from the Burnt Chef. And yeah, they really, really helped me through what was just an extraordinarily scary moment. And then when I moved to North Yorkshire, I was like, oh, you know what? I'm in a good place now. I want to give something back and I want to help the community. And I don't want anyone to ever go through anything like that again. Yeah, so that's me.
What a way to enter the podcast. Well, thank you. I mean, shit, that sounds... Do you know what? I don't think I ever realised that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That sounds tough.
Yeah, we'd literally ejected this guy for harassing one of my young bartenders. And me and the door team have got him out. We're having a cigarette outside about 10 minutes later, and he's come back in Daddy's car and pulled a shotgun out the boot. We got very, very lucky. We unvacked the whole place, made sure everybody was safe, but the police drove past as it was all going down. So we got very, very lucky.
Matt, what?
Wow.
Sorry, I'm still stumped by that.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that you had to go through that, you and your team, and even the initial reason that you evicted him is bad enough and is harassing your team. So, yeah, really feel for you all. I guess my story started around COVID, same as everybody else. And before COVID, I'd sort of seen snippets of mental health in the industry, see individuals struggle, particularly with work-life balance. And as I mentioned earlier on, the late hours that we work and often working weekends and so on. COVID for me, we had a little boy on the 2nd of March, 2020. And I, unbeknown to me at the time, was suffering with postnatal depression all of that summer, which I didn't know men could suffer with. So I think it's really important to mention that in case anybody else is going through something similar or may do in the future. I got to quite a dark place myself, to be honest, and thankfully managed to self-diagnose, self-help just by looking at Google, and got on an upward spiral and found my way out of it. And fast forward a few months, I'd moved on from my general manager role that I'd had through COVID after being furloughed and sitting at home where I used to do 60 hours a week. I think that in itself created a little bit of struggle that summer, but moved on, found a new role. But sadly, 2 or 3 weeks after I left the hotel, one of my old chefs sadly took his own life. Since then, I've had 2 more former colleagues take their own life. So it's something that's, mental health is something that is incredibly close to home for me and raw. And so I came across the project initially off the back of losing that first chef and Googling what help was out there for chefs in particular at the time, and came across the Burnt Chef project. And as Tony sort of touched on, really resonated with the reason it came to be, the support it offers. And I suppose the topic that we're discussing today is that sense of community. Yes, for ambassadors, and ultimately that's what led me to become an ambassador, to share the word. And as I say so often, is if we can help one more person choose a different path, then it makes everything worth the work that we do. But also creating a sense of community around chefs that I then came across in the future, to know that I can signpost them to help, that there's actually ambassadors in every region in the UK at the time, now internationally. So if anybody were ever struggling, they've got people to talk to, people to reach out who understand, not always trained psychologists or therapists, but who are an ear to lend you, a shoulder to cry on, somebody to ask questions to, who can then signpost to those other professional services. And yes, since been involved now for 4.5 years, obviously do a lot of fundraising for the project, really believe in the message that we send to the industry, and I think it's needed now more than ever. So, yeah.
Thank you, Matt. And I'm going to pick on you a little bit because you've also been working with us internally now for some period of time. And after your heroic trip to Snowdon, which involved Matt leaving his front door in Birmingham and walking all the way to Snowdon to start a fundraising challenge with us there, we got chatting, and Matt's got a fantastic set of skills that has really benefited the Burnt Chef project internally. But what were some of the standout moments from you? I remember our conversation was like, I just didn't realize the level of work or what the Burnt Chef project did behind closed doors. Is there anything in particular that you can share with the audience that really stood out for you during those early days?
Early days of working directly for the project.
Yeah.
I think the scale was something that really took me back. I think when you see the project from almost an ambassador or outsider point of view, yes, you see that there's support there and that we can do a bit of fundraising to raise those crucial funds, or the sense of community as we're discussing today. But I think the thing that really in the initial first few weeks I had to wrap my head around was the scale of all of that and the work that goes into that behind the scenes. And we've got a very small core team, right? So we all have clearly defined roles. Sometimes we cross over and support each other. Of course we do. But it is all go, all of the time. We have an immense amount of supporters, partners, and there's so many more out there. And ambassadors, of course, Mark looking after that community as well. There's so many people out there who want to support our work and want to get involved, that it is just growing at such a rate to support the industry, obviously, at what is a difficult time. So, yeah, I think the message I would send is the more ambassadors we have, the more supporters, the more partners, it allows us to continue that good work that we're doing. And please send them our way.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, and I think for context, up until the beginning of March, we had about 250 volunteers around the globe, quite heavily concentrated in places like States, Canada, Australia, parts of Europe and the UK and Ireland. Since our most recent application period finished at the end of March, we've had another 204 applications come in, which now also grows us to places like Norway and Indonesia, Colombia. There's all over the world. It's absolutely amazing, the sheer volume of people who want to volunteer their time and expertise and help us challenge and tackle not just the stigmas associated with mental health issues, but also culture and other subjects such as menopause and addictions and things like sexual harassment. It's absolutely phenomenal. So opening it up then to whoever wants to go, what's some of the key things that I think from the ambassador side of things, that the community that's been created and that's a really active community, what are some of the key highlights that make that community look and feel so unique to you guys?
The ambassador community is great, and we've obviously had a Midlands region set up for a number of years now. When I saw the real value of that, my wife and I lost a baby probably about 12 months ago now, just over 12 months ago. And at that time, I found that, yes, I had family that would support and obviously close friends and work colleagues at the time. But really, it was that ambassador community, that initial group of individuals, very special individuals who understand the deeper impact that something like that could have on an individual, who supported me through that period. And even now, thankfully, every cloud has a silver lining. And we've just had our beautiful baby boy, second baby boy. And now I can look back and everything happened for a reason. But at the time, it was that immediate ambassador community who really pulled me through that difficult moment in our lives. And fast forward 6 months, obviously, yes, I do the Snowdon Birmingham to Snowdon walk, and even now training for an ultra in a couple of weeks' time. And that community, more broadly, people like Lou, John Dunn over in Ireland, Neo in the States. We've had Alan over here recently from Australia. And when I'm sort of looking for fundraising or even just put a post up or drop something in our community chat, there's just so many individuals who actually, many of whom I've never met in person, are there to offer advice, offer support, a guiding light if you need one, even just there for a general chat so you feel like you've got somebody to talk to, which in itself is community, isn't it? And an ideal that we're all in it for the same reason, same goals together. And that's been my takeaway, I guess, as part of that community.
Thanks, Matt. And thank you for sharing as well. I appreciate that. That was challenging. Who else would like to talk about what the community means to them and what some of the key highlight elements are for you?
Some of the things for me, I think Matt's touched on to a degree, that we've got a very unique, diverse and special group chat where we talk as individuals, I think. But for me, on a wider level, is co-managing the worldwide Facebook Burnt Chef Project group, where you'll see those things that Matt's just discussed. We'll see that on a worldwide level with absolute strangers. And that will be someone that's being challenged in a workplace and doesn't know where to channel that and ask questions, or that may well be that someone wants to share a great plate of food that they really enjoyed, or to just reach out and say, I've had a really tough day, I don't know where I'm going with this, or how can I be involved? What are the fundraising tips that you can give? And so that's on a literal global scale, as Matt's mentioned about our own group chat. So for that, it's almost a highlight being involved with that every day. And there are many days where it's quiet. There's very few things on there, or somebody will stream a mad chat about absolutely nothing. So you have to kind of keep an eye on that. But there are the elements in there where it's really memorable and profound, that I'm struggling and I'm in the middle of nowhere, and who do I go to? Where's my nearest ambassador, or who can I speak to? And then being able to pick that up, translate that into our group chat, who's available in X, Y, or Z area, city, country. And there will be someone that says, yeah, I can speak to them, no problem. That's in my time zone, country, wherever. And to have that as an opportunity is incredible. But it's, as Matt said, really, I think we've all got unique ambassadors around us that are completely on the same wavelength, that have just been there and done that, and have been through some of the exact same challenges of anxiety, aggression, panic, depression. However it manifests itself is obviously different to everybody, but I think we've all understood and have been able to go, yeah, it's okay, I've got it, or I understand. And that's incredible anywhere in the world.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Louise?
Yeah, I think kind of having that almost safety net, even if you don't make use of it, even if you don't put a message on saying I need help or whatever, just knowing that you can is a great thing. Obviously, I'm kind of on my own here in Durban and in South Africa. But last year in July, I went to Cape Town on holiday, and I actually managed to meet up with Brandon, originally from Canada and now in Saudi or Dubai, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And that was really nice. And he was so supportive in that. And he was like, don't worry, when we started in Canada, we started really small, and it took a couple of years before it took off and things like that. So that was really nice. So like I say, I think just knowing the support is there if you need it is great.
Yeah, I appreciate your patience again. As I said with Tony, it's so difficult because we're only 6 years old.
Yeah.
Right? We're 6 years old, and we've done the same work as an organization who's been going for 50 years. And these things do take time. We have had applications from South Africa, but we always need more as well. So if you're listening and you're in South Africa or any part of Africa for that matter, and you want to get involved because you sound like this is the best fucking club to be part of in the world, you're right, it is, and you should apply. So get involved today. Now, we'll even open up ambassador applications for you specially, just so that you can apply, because we are looking for people in these regions. So yeah, don't delay. Apply today. Oh God, that sounds like such a cheesy fucking ad. I'm so sorry. Louise,
Are you selling cars?
The wheels of my cars would come off, so I'm going to stick to what I know with this. Louise Jackson, what about yourself? Because we saw each other at a fundraiser up in Doncaster only fairly recently, right?
We did, yeah. Yeah, I think it's that again, like everybody's mentioned the community aspect and, you know, you're never alone. And it was really nice when Simon put the message out in the group chat and was like, there's tickets available to this gala. And it was like really last minute, but it was like, oh, actually, I'm free. I can go and support this. That's really nice. And getting to meet other ambassadors. And yeah, like when we did Snowdon, that was quite nice because I was still quite new to Yorkshire. Didn't really have many friends up here. And myself and Katie went for a wild swim on the way to Wales. And it was just nice to meet up with another ambassador. And you've always got something to talk about. Like, so it's really easy to make friends and connections. And yeah, it's just such a tight-knit group of people from everywhere that, yeah, it's just really nice.
I think like you guys have summarized it beautifully, but I think that that's one of the things that really stands out the most. I mean, I've been very lucky to have traveled to different countries, and wherever I go, I know that there's always an ambassador there. And it's the maddest thing is that you can get off a plane in Toronto or Atlanta or Germany or Italy or Spain, like Madrid recently. And I have met an ambassador from each of those countries who have taken you out for lunch. They've picked you up. They know exactly who you are. It feels like a friend that you haven't seen for, 10 years, but you know that you guys are there. And I think that is one of the wildest things and one of the most incredible things about the Burnt Chef project is the fact that these individuals exist all around the globe. Like Brandon, for example, met him in Canada, in Toronto. He's now hosting a burnt brunch for us in Dubai. And he came over to South Africa and met up with Louise in South Africa as well. Like, it's that power of connection and community that's just allowing us to not just spread a message, but also to create meaningful connections with each other, which is just, it's mad. It is completely mad. Never did I envisage it to be like this all those years ago. And we're still growing. It's still getting bigger. If you're enjoying this week's episode, consider heading over to our website and supporting our ongoing work in destigmatizing mental illness and creating a healthier, happier, and more sustainable industry by purchasing some of our branded merchandise. We have a whole range of t-shirts, hoodies, chef's jackets, well-being journals, plus a whole host more available on worldwide dispatch. All funds raised from sales of these items go towards free-to-access e-learning content, as well as providing free support systems and help for those who may be experiencing difficulty with their mental health. So all of you have been within the working world, all of you have experienced different styles of leadership and culture and community. What do you think is lacking from workplace environments when it comes down to community, identity, belonging? What are the sort of key pitfalls, do you think?
I have two different sides of the coin, if you want to say. My previous position, I worked for a contract catering company, and they're all about putting out the most, getting the most back and spending the least. And it was really hard. I mean, I eventually ended up with burnout. I spent 1 month where I had one day off the whole month and I was working 12-hour shifts and I was finished. And then I have my current job where I'm working for the most fantastic chef who championed me the whole way through the Burnt Chef project application. He was one of my references. And I actually had phoned him. I wasn't working at the time and I'd seen a job advertised and I knew that he knew the people. And I phoned him and I was like, can I put you down as a personal reference? And he was like, well, you can, but why don't you just rather come and work for me? And I work 3 days a week, 5 hours a day, which is incredible. But one of his main things was to go in and do staff wellness. So he sees the importance of if your staff are in a good place, your business is in a good place. Whereas the previous one, it was like, just work yourself to the ground because we need all of this money to come in or whatever, So, yeah.
I do think that is like a really good point, Every company is really feeling the squeeze at the minute, and there is a lot of, we need this money, we're going to have to cut costs. And the teams do just get left behind. It's, well, we don't have the money to run anything more than a skeleton shift, so why we have to actually look after them fast. It's quite scary.
It's definitely getting challenging out there. But ultimately, you know, unless you're creating those environments where people feel like they belong and they've got a purpose and they've got that sense of support and that community, then they're not likely to stay even when things are going well as well. So you have to create that, and you have to always be mindful of that as well. And you don't always going to get it perfect. You're not always going to get it perfect. But I think, you know, we can be a little bit too black and white when it comes to running businesses, that, you know, people are, yeah, it's fine. We've got an infinite resource of people queuing up to get jobs. Well, that used to be the case 10 years ago, but that isn't the case now at all. Tony, Matt?
I think for me, I look back on sort of 25 years of being in Chef White's on the tools. I think there are 3 really different cultures that I've worked for. The first one is you're high on cocaine. You have no fucking idea what you're doing in your business, and you just turn up and just go home. And the chefs are all stood there scratching their head going, what are we doing? What are we working for? What are we working towards? And so it just sort of creates independence and nobody's aligned. The second one is super tough. It's super militant. It's very dictatorial and can be seen as aggressive and toxic. And in which case everyone's terrified to say anything because they'll get screamed at or something will be launched across the room with a kind of just fix it mentality. Don't give a fuck, just fix it, you know, at your own expense, really, at your own cost, physically, mentally, financially, whatever that may be. And the third one is probably the absolute opposite to that, is where you don't want to upset the apple cart. You don't hold anyone accountable. You don't have any sort of coaching skills, and that there are only super soft skills. There aren't anything else to sort of balance it. So for me, it's sort of taking particularly 2 of those and being able to identify one of those, of the sort of abuse side of things, the addiction side of things, but being able to hold accountability, have coaching, and be able to kind of hold a pinch point that when it starts to struggle, that you can step in and say, right, okay, here's how we're going to fix it. But also know when to pull back and not be at that lion share of kind of dominance, if you like, at the front of it, and knowing when to step back and say, guys, this is how you're going to go forward. This is how I'm going to bring up, you know, a commie to a CDP. I'm struggling to find CDPs in the industry to recruit, and I'm going to spend 3 months recruiting for one and spending fortunes outsourcing. You could spend that same 3 months not spending a penny and just focusing on that commie to bring him up to a CDP, rather than putting him in his place and saying, that's the box you're staying in. There has to be a balance of all of those, isn't there? On a Saturday night at 8 o'clock, watching The Bear recently, he says about Saturday night, 8 p.m., 8:15 is his absolute pinnacle of anxiety. And that's because it's at the toughest point. So you do need to be, you know, accountable at the forefront, leading it and being able to have broad shoulders to absorb it. But that doesn't need to be there 7 days a week, 365 days. You do need to pull back and be able to offer coaching, stepping in terms of support, but not being the guy that's high on drugs in the corner that has no idea what's going on and is a danger to everyone and himself, and not being the lunatic narcissist that's screaming at everyone, making it all about his ego. There has to be a balance, and finding all of those places in one system all through the week and knowing which one you need at which point. And that's the identification, I guess, of a good working culture, is that you can absorb the pressure, you can step back, you can coach and actually deliver and go forward in different ways. So it's tough. It can be tough. And not everyone knows how to be all of those things. You know, to a lot of chefs, particularly for the early days, for me, you were only that one thing because that was that one thing that you ever saw everywhere was screaming and throwing stuff across the room. And so you're sort of bred and taught to be that. And so therefore the next guy that comes in under you is the same because you've bred and trained him to be. Whereas nowadays we need to look at it, there has to be a blend of balance. Otherwise you have got, you know, a singular culture rather than an inclusive culture. And that's difficult to articulate for a business.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's definitely not the supportive community that you would join up for. I mean, people want to work and be part of it, not necessarily work. I think no matter where you are in life, whether it's personally or professionally, you want to be part of something where you feel like you're valued, that your voice is heard, that you have an opinion, you know, that you feel safe and secure, and sometimes you're challenged in the right ways as well, but challenged in supportive ways. And having an environment that isn't those things is just, it's going to lead to the sort of numbers that we see on a regular basis of 80% of people experiencing, you know, stress and mental illness because of these environments. So yeah, it's a really good point. What about yourself, Matt? What does a supportive or what does a poor culture, a poor community versus a supportive community and culture look like for yourself within the workplace?
I think following on from particularly what Lou said around key decisions being made, I guess, my experience has been that, yes, we're operating in a tougher environment than we probably ever have as an industry. And so naturally, there's going to be a focus on margins and return on investment for owners and investors. And everyone has their own KPIs to hit, right? So decisions are sometimes made. And I suppose coming back to community, it's the concept of that collective involvement, collective ideal, where we all want to feel part of something bigger. And when those decisions are stripped away and you feel like you don't have a say, you haven't got an impact, that your voice isn't heard, that's where community breaks down. And that's a really easy thing to address in a workplace. Yes, there's difficult decisions that sometimes have to be made, but do that on a consultative basis and involve people in what does the future look like. And actually, are we looking for the next 3 months? Things like COVID could come along and that dictates that we have to look very short term. But actually, proper business planning would suggest that we could potentially look at doing things 12 months from now, 24 months from now, whereby we can involve all of the workforce at different levels and create a really involved feel across that business organization or just locally on site. So I think that's when it comes then back to what sort of leader are you, remembering the reasons why we lead and almost shining the light forward for the leaders of tomorrow. This is the way to lead well versus this is how we need to protect a margin on a P&L, for example. And I've been guilty of that as well. I'm far from perfect. And I suppose it comes back to what are your morals internally and how do you want to be remembered 25, 30, 50 years from now? Looking back on your career, do you want to be remembered as a great person, a great leader, a person who did the right things versus protecting a P&L or, those are the things that I've mentioned. So that's generally my biggest takeaway from the industry is leading through people. I think we've lost that over the last few years. It's something I think we need to get back as an industry.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the great thing about hospitality is we're very good at being able to turn around on a dime and get things sorted. Okay, we have this yes mentality or a fixed mentality, right? We can solve most problems. But also what it's inadvertently done is isolated individuals and organizations and teams by doing so because we're so focused on the business or the customer that we've actually ended up forgetting about the culture of the organization or the people involved. And all of you on this episode have shared something that's personal to you and were some of the reasons why you got involved in the Burnt Chef project in the first place. What would you say are some of the barriers to others? Having worked with the Burnt Chef project now for a number of years, all of you, what would you say are some of the barriers that people have when it comes down to trying to build that connection or to talk about their own struggles with mental health or to reach out and get that support? What have you seen some of the barriers and what have you seen maybe some success stories as well?
Here in South Africa, one of the biggest problems we have is a cultural thing that mental health is like they don't recognize depression and anxiety and things like that. It's, a physical defect. Cool. They acknowledge it. Somebody who needs to be institutionalized, they'll also accept it to a certain degree. But somebody having depression and anxiety, from a cultural point of view, a lot of them have it as it's your ancestors bothering you. And it's trying to, while the younger generation, like the kids that are in college at the moment, kind of accept it and understand it, they have trouble getting their older generation, so their parents and their grandparents and that, to understand and accept it. So for me, that's one of my stumbling blocks here is, yes, the kids that I do presentations to understand it, but to actually get their elders to understand it and accept it is an issue.
That is a huge challenge that we see in other parts of the globe as well. It's you can start to challenge the hierarchy systems and the way that an industry works, but actually changing a multi-generational culture is hard, but not impossible. I think You know, we look at the work that we've done in places like Italy, for example, and they didn't even have a word for burnout in Italian. But if you start talking to people about high stress and the impact that it has on lives, all of a sudden people resonate and they understand the reasons for it. So it's definitely a slow burner. But you know, to deny that depression, anxiety, or mental health issues exist is to deny people of their life. Really, is to deny that they're human and that they feel. There was a really interesting episode that I did last week with a psychiatrist, a doctor of psychology and psychiatry, and he was saying that depression, anxiety is something that every animal, every mammal on the world or in the world will experience. It's designed there as a protection mechanism to keep you alive, because if you didn't have depression or if you didn't have anxiety, you would put yourself in risk. You'd walk out in front of cars, or you'd do things that are harmful, walk into fires, etc., etc. So by that very reasoning, if every animal has that built into them as a protection mechanism, then for cultures to deny that it exists, it's kind of, they're going to have to at some stage acknowledge it, because it's not going anywhere, and it's only going to become worse of a problem the more you try and suppress it. What, Tony, Matt, Louise, what do you think some of the barriers are?
If I could just, I suppose, tag on to the back of that idea, I guess what I've seen, being lucky enough to work directly for the project, is actually the businesses out there that adopt a mental health first approach as part of their ongoing culture, whether that be mental health first aid training, volunteer days, the list is endless in terms of the things they can put in place. Is actually when you have those things in place within a business, it actually decreases the amount of mental health related sickness, because people know where to go, who to talk to. They can identify it both in themselves and their colleagues. So therefore they can tackle it earlier on in that spiral. So I guess it's part of that education that I think we need to continue educating the industry. And the more measures you can have in place proactively, the better impact that's going to have on your business and those working within it. That would be my key takeaway.
Thanks, Matt. Tony, Louise?
I think similarly, really, to Matt, I think if you're looking at my generation, you know, being 45, we were built with a resilience and pressure instilled into us, but we weren't great at being taught the articulation skills. We weren't good at being taught, you know, how to say, actually, I'm really struggling. This is fucking shit. You know, it was just, you need to get on with it. You need to get on with it is kind of the strap line of a lot of the businesses that I've certainly grown through the ranks of. Is, well, just suck it up. You just need to get on with it. Whereas I think on the opposite, the kind of more, you know, the sort of college leavers that are coming through now have got all of those soft skills of understanding and the articulation. They've got that. They actually get that. The communication has been taught from us to them. And on the opposite of social media or whatever else it is that's you know, widely used, the articulation isn't the problem. The resilience is the challenge. Is that they also don't have, as a balance, there has to be a sort of fine balance to it of some of that pressure, some of that, you know, requirement is that you do need to persist and you do need to keep going, because there are demands, there are financial challenges. You do need a job, you do need to work, you do need to earn money. But there has to be a brake mechanism, a gap mechanism, a control mechanism, that it's not just a forever infinite pressure that is just a breaking point. There does need to be a kind of, okay, that I can see that is too much pressure. That isn't enough pressure for that person. But that needs to be looked at as a management system, a management mechanism of being able to read your people. And I think that's from then emotional intelligence and being able to understand and read people, I think, is where you will only get the best out of your team. And I think that's all of us have understood, and all of us have kind of mentioned in some way, shape or form, of knowing who to go to, when to go to, where to go to for information, support, or a conversation. And that's always, I think, particularly if you're coming through the ranks now, when you were coming into a kitchen, and like you said, the demands that are financial on a business at the moment of just make money, just turn up on time, expected 18-hour days, etc. There's a huge amount of pressure. And so how do you train the more junior team to get into that water and turn the temperature up, rather than it, you know, being at 100 degrees and expected to just jump in and it be fine? There has to be some sort of balance to it.
It's such a poignant point. Matt and I were at an event fairly recently. I was chatting to quite a high-profile chef about this, who was saying back when he was younger, he would do 3 services a day, and it would be a few hundred people, and it would be fine dining, and there'd be multiple plates, and he really got put through the ringer, and that's how he learned his craft, and that's how he developed. He said, well, the problem with the younger generation is they're not resilient. They're only doing 1 service, and they can't speak to customers and all this sort of stuff. And I feel like it's almost like we're going back to the days of COVID where we're trying to talk about mental health and, that's not the done thing. We don't do that. And it's kind of like stuck in this time warp of going, well, back in our day, it was a lot easier. So they should be able to do this. And I think there's quite a big point here about actually moving with the times and understanding that actually COVID, technology, all of this other stuff has changed the way in which we interact with each other. And now is the time that we actually have to start dialing up a more supportive culture and community element to our working practices rather than trying to wish that things were back the way they were, because that's not how societies evolve. That's not how industries evolve. They change and adapt. And unless you adapt, you end up being a dinosaur that's constantly sat in the rocking chair going, remember the days when it used to be like this, where can you imagine now, right? Let's take this for an example. Can you imagine you've got a whole world of hospitality professionals going, do you remember the days when we had to light the candles before we went to work, and we had to light the josper and the fire to be able to cook our foods, and God, those were the days. Like, we don't say that about electricity or ovens or, whatever it might be now that we've become reliant upon. We've adapted and we absorb that into our working practices. So we just, I don't know, it's just such an odd thing for me, because when they think about the support that we need to give our teams, we look at it as like a completely different resource than we would do something that was like a car. I wish those were the days where I could get on a horse and my horse and track and go into work. God, those were the days. Life was a lot simpler back then. No, you jump in your car and you're like, thank God for that. You're playing your music. And yet we just look at the evolution of community and leadership and culture and conversations around mental health as a completely different skill set.
I think at that point as well, Kris, you might have then industry professionals say, well, yeah, but businesses are tougher than ever. How do we afford to do all of those things and look after our staff? And we know you did a talk fairly recently and I was in the audience and that question got posed. But actually, so many of the protection measures that we can put in place as leaders, as businesses, don't cost a thing. They're meaningful one-to-ones, maybe once a month or even once a quarter, and 5-minute catch-ups in between, but structured, on time, in both of your calendars, and what the action points are off the back of that, so that individual can continue to grow and contribute, and also know if they haven't been performing or if there's any concerns, they know where they are and they can action those things. And I think so many businesses out there still don't have that very basic appraisal, one-to-one, job chat, coffee chat, call it what you will, but meaningful conversation where both parties know where we are and where we need to go. And that's a thing that can be put in place right now for absolutely no cost.
It's a really valid point. I was exec chef for a garden centre in Warrington for nearly 5 years. And every morning for 5 years, I'd start at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., whatever it may be. And I'd go over and make, 25 coffees for the team, because there were 25 chefs in every morning or whatever it was, particularly at peak at Christmas. There was an army of us. But I'd take every single one of them a coffee and every single one of them over to their section, every single one of them to the whiteboard that was in front of them, which was sort of split down the two. Of one side would be a prep list for the day, priorities, your top 10 priorities, and the other half would be, prep or ingredients that you needed. And we'd go over every single morning. I'd say, here's your coffee. How are you? I'm on this section today. This is what I'm doing. This is where I am. This is what I'll be doing. I've got time at this time, this time, this time. What do you need from me? And 9 out of 10 times it was, cheers. I'll grab my coffee, get out of my way. You're in my bloody way. I've got prep to do. I've got kit to do. You're in the way and you're irritating. But on the off chance, there was one time, a morning where somebody would say, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for the coffee. I really need to talk to you in a minute. I really need 2 minutes of your time. I really need, or I've just seen we've got our appraisal next week. What do I need to prepare for it? Or it was a simple thing, and it cost nothing to go over, give a coffee. And it was a shit coffee at 6 a.m. in the morning. I'm not standing with a latte art. You're getting instant. And, we were, by the litre. But it was that interaction, that 2 minutes with everyone every morning of, where are we up to? What are you doing? How do you need me? What can I do to help you? What is your challenges for today? Just like you say, a meaningful conversation. But it was impactful to them. It's impactful to me. I understood obviously where they were up to for the day, but they also understood where I was for the day. And that's not always something you get from your senior. It's normally kind of arm's length and quite kind of, them and us mentality almost, isn't it? Of kind of, well, I need to know where you're at, but you're not getting anything from me. It's mutual agreement and conversation. And like you say, it's got to be meaningful. Otherwise they won't come to you.
I think that brings us on to one of the final closing point for this special edition episode, which is, if you could say one thing to someone who's struggling with loneliness or feeling unsupported in the workplace or the industry, or just needed to open up, talk about something that was bothering them, what sort of advice or what thing would you say to from each of you to someone who might be struggling with those topics?
As someone that has struggled, and I'm quite socially awkward, like outside of work. Work is where I use up all of my people energy. And, if you don't know where to go, you don't have like your close-knit group of friends, or you don't feel comfortable talking to your manager or whatever, reach out to one of us, reach out to an ambassador, come just text in. We don't know who you are. It doesn't matter, but we're all here for you. But on the flip side, if you do feel comfortable, go get your manager. Just say, can we have a coffee or a ciggy? Can we go for a walk? Can we get outside of the business and just go for a walk? It's usually a lot easier to walk and talk. So yeah.
I guess for me, it's find your people. And yes, you'll have your community and your support network, whether that be your family, your friends, your colleagues, the Burnt Chef ambassadors, whoever it may be. And it can be online or in person. It can be remote or local. But just find your people who you can confide in, who you can share with, who you can outwardly vocalize any struggles that you do have. And there's so many support networks out there. Just don't be afraid to use them. We exist to remove the stigma around mental health and talking about mental health. And there's so many other businesses as well who do a similar thing. If somebody's out there struggling, feels lonely, there's always somebody to talk to. There's always a project to get involved in. There's always a walk to go on, or a challenge, or a skydive you can be part of, So don't feel like you are alone. There's a whole community of people at the moment who feel alone, who feel like they're struggling, and we're in it together.
I would say pretty much the same as everybody else. There's always one person somewhere that you can talk to. One of the things that I've also found quite helpful is if I sit down and write everything out, so that I don't have it running around my head and getting confused in that. Write it out and look at it, and it just helps you kind of get it to a point where you don't have all these hundreds of thoughts running around. You can actually look at it and go, okay, that one, yes, I can do that with that. Okay, here I really do need to speak to someone, rather than, even if you, like I say, if you go and find somebody and you start talking, you're going to have all these thoughts going through. So if you've got it written down, it kind of just gives it a bit more perspective.
That's great advice. Yeah, really good, really cathartic, and it also allows you to try and focus your thoughts, right? Because it can be difficult talking about whether you feel lonely, you worry about what people might think about you, or whether it's a mental health issue that you think you're the only person in the world that's struggling with. The fact is, we live on this beautiful blue planet, this hunk of rock that's floating around in space, and again, because of makeup that we all have, the chances are that there is someone, at least one other person on the planet who has experienced or has experienced something similar. And that by sharing how you feel, you're likely to be able to start to find that connection and find that sense of belonging and move through that period. But writing it down will definitely help you be able to make it coherent if you do worry about how it's going to be received. Tony?
Yeah, I think Louise was perfect in saying writing it down. I'm a huge fan of journaling, and I've used it for years, particularly when you're not able to get in front of people. You're not able to, you're in a hotel and you're not near family or whatever, and you know it's 12 o'clock at night, you're certainly not going to ring your partner and wake them up and say how bad your day is. That's not going to potentially come across the right way, and particularly you're not going to be able to articulate in the right way because you, for whatever reason. But journaling certainly does help. It also helps you over a maybe mid to longer range of time, being able to articulate that in a number of days. You'll be able to track and understand yourself and be able to see whether your mood or your feelings or your depression, anxiety, whatever is becoming heightened, better, worse, what you're implementing to kind of improve that. So being able to write it down is a great way. And that could just be a text. That could be a text to your, partner, family member, fellow ambassador. Mate, I've had a really difficult day. Have you got 2 minutes for me? Like I said, when I was, doing a coffee run in the garden centre at 6 a.m. or whatever, the guys would say, have you got 2 minutes? Do you need to get anything from the fridge? You need a fridge chat? Let's go. So we would, go, right, okay. What do you need from the fridge? I'll come and grab it for you. You come and grab what you need, and we'll have 2 minutes of a very quick private chat in the fridge. And if there's anything I can do after that, or whatever the challenge is, I need to leave early, I need to go home, I need to do this, or I need to do, okay, let's have a conversation. And what do we do about how we stop that from feeling like that going forward? Or how do we help prevent that? How does that feel less tomorrow? And I think sometimes we look at it as a huge rock that we need to get rid of, rather than just taking it sort of step by step, day by day, and making the rock smaller, rather than trying to get rid of the rock overnight, get rid of that boulder that's on your shoulders or whatever it is immediately. And there isn't always a quick fix. It didn't just get there overnight. It's been built up and hasn't been dealt with. And in the same context, it needs to be removed. You can't just flick a switch. And I think sometimes we expect the switch to be flicked with a very quick medication or with a substance or whatever it may be. And so I think just being able to articulate that and being able to reach out to someone and say, yesterday was tough. I need to tell you what went wrong. We need to make sure that you're there to help with how I fix that today, or how can you help me fix it today? Just being present, I think, is huge.
Thanks, Tony. And Matt, any parting advice from you for our listeners?
Yeah, just following on from what Tony's mentioned, really. I think we've spoken a lot, obviously, around community and what businesses can put in place for their team members. I think it's important to acknowledge there's a level of responsibility and accountability for the individual as well. And often putting yourself out there, while it may feel uncomfortable to reach out for help or do a skydive or a walk or anything else, through doing that, you open doors to more support networks, more communities that are out there. And I use one example. While it may not have been from a place of struggle, 12 months ago to the day, I was meant to be doing a service at the summit, raising funds and awareness for the project. And the person I was supposed to be doing it with bailed out at the last minute. And I put a little note into our Discord group, and it was Tony that came and joined me. We'd never met each other before. Yes, we're part of the same Burnt Chef Ambassador community. The first time I met Tony in person was having a hug in a car park at the base of Snowdon. And off we went. And since then, the point I'm trying to make is, since then, by putting ourselves out there and going and doing that challenge together, Tony and I have now been to 4 or 5 different college talks, industry events. We've been there to support each other's teams. I've helped him with his own business and vice versa. So it really opens doors to what support can be out there, just by taking a little bit of accountability yourself and putting yourself into that uncomfortable zone, I guess.
That's beautiful, mate. And what a fantastic way to finish off this episode. And again, I think if anyone is interested in joining the most fucking epic club in the entire world, full of people with such a wealth of experience and empathy and just generally good human beings, then head over to our website and look at the ambassador scheme. And if the application window isn't open where you are currently, then hang fire, because it will be towards the end of the year and you'll have your opportunity. But guys, Tony, Louise and Matt, thank you ever so much for joining on this week's special episode for Mental Health Awareness Week. And if anyone wants to find you, they can head across to our website, go to the ambassador page. You'll find full contact information for each of our guests today. And thanks for also carrying me through this. Again, power of community. I am ill. You guys did a fantastic job. I now need to go and find some Lemsip with my name on it. and some honey and lemon as well. So thank you, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kris.